So first of all, I think it's great to be the only man in this panel, in a venture capital panel.
Great to be the only women in the panel.
And before we start, I think the first thing is to say, I think Uriel, Shani, Dvora, and Tamar, who organized this, I think this would never happen without you. What happened in the last year around this sector of climate tech is really a bottom-up initiative that started from the ground up, and I think they all really deserve a round of applause. Okay, so nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Hanan Brand. I'm the Vice President of the Israel Innovation Authority and the head of the Startup Division. Previously, I sat on this side of the panel. I was a venture capitalist for 15 years, and now I moved to be in the government position, helping startups. Israel Innovation Authority was always very bullish on this sector or sectors of climate tech. Around 16% of our annual budget goes to climate tech. We invested in 290 companies in the last 3 years. 290 companies. We have 7 incubators and laboratories who are focused on climate technologies. Around 50% of the companies you see here outside actually started with government grants. And that's mainly because there was not enough money in the private sector to invest and start these initiatives. However, as we see here, there's a demand growing in the market, and we need to see more investors and more venture capitalists investing money. Last year, only 2.9% of the funding in Israel went into energy, water, agri-tech, and food tech, while 80% of funding went into ICT, and especially what we call the FIX, FinTech, Cyber, and SaaS. So my question here, maybe for the panel, everyone, maybe you can introduce yourself as part of it, is what's actually needed to make climate tech more mainstream? How can we get more investment into this sector in order to support the growth of the climate tech sector? Who wants to start? Cecile, you want to be first?
Sure. So hi everyone, my name is Cecile Blilious, and I'm the head of impact and sustainability for Pitango Venture Capital, one of Israel's largest and oldest VCs. In my role, I take the world of ESG, impact, the sustainable development goals, all these things around mainstream investing. So Pitango works out of 3 parallel funds, and we've decided to integrate the world of climate, the world of sustainability, the world of social impact into everything we do. So it's not a dedicated pool of capital. Instead, it's something that goes mainstream. And I think this is the answer to your question. So a year ago, this conference would not have been possible, right? We didn't have the infrastructure, the startups, the investors, people would know how to speak about it. Funnily enough, a lot of entrepreneurs till this day sometimes think they don't even have a carbon footprint because they're software-based startups. So we're very far ahead in terms of where we were before. This is a good place to start jumping ahead. In order to make more investments and to bring more capital, we need to mainstream climate tech. We need to mainstream the notion that a lot of companies that might not be branded as climate tech actually have a very strong influence on climate and need to understand the climate mindset in order to get that in. So first, mainstream funds need to invest in climate tech startups per se, and they need, and we all need, to integrate climate considerations into every possible startup that we invest in.
Natalie.
Hi, so I'm Natalie. I'm a general partner at Viola Growth. We are a generalist fund investing in growth stage companies. We also have in the group a VC fund and a fintech dedicated fund and a credit fund. To your point, Hanan, so I think the most important point for me to state today is that there is right now a conference in Tel Aviv of Jefferies. It's an investment bank, and the 80% of the capital that goes into the ICT investors are there. And despite that, and it's for me, this is my ecosystem because I'm a generalist investor and I mostly invest in software, deep tech, and any other vertical software that you can think of. And for me, it was very important to be here instead of there, because I think this is the future. And when you go, you have to understand that and to start to investigate this ecosystem, start to learn about it, and you cannot jump into it when it's too late. You need to explore and understand it right now, because now it's starting to ramp up, and I think that this is on the way to do it. And I think that also, as Cecile mentioned, we at Viola, we partnered with PLANETech in order to make a full review of our portfolio companies on the ESG, with a dominance on the E, as the first step. Second step is to include within our investments due diligence part on ESG matters. And the third part would be that we will start investing directly into companies on that field. I have to say that there are two, I would say, definitions of what is a climate tech companies, because a climate tech company can be a company that by product also does good for the earth and for the environment. It's not dedicated to solve a certain problem, while there, and that we have quite many, because for any efficiency that you work on in the market, in retail, even in construction, in many areas, software might solve a certain also environmental problem. But the more interesting part for the future is to really invest in the companies that are solving directly the environmental or other climate tech problem that the world needs to fight for.
So hello everyone, I'm Elle. I'm part of the investment team at Hanaco Ventures, and I'm also leading the impact and sustainability, our impact and sustainability approach. Really happy to be here. Actually, I think this is how you make climate tech mainstream, having this kind of amazing conventions, having generalist investors speaking about this opportunity, and also having this great crowd here with us. I also read the PLANETech report for 2022 and saw that 15% of the money that was invested in H1 for tech companies went to climate tech companies. I think it says a lot. And yeah, we definitely feel that there is an urgency around climate change. We feel and we see more commitments from our LPs, from institutional investors, from governments, from corporates. Not enough. We'd be happy to see more, but we feel it. To be honest, Hanaco, like at Hanaco, our skin is definitely in the game. We invested in lots of climate tech companies, starting from alternative protein companies like Redefine Meat, New Meat, I recommend you to try, and Remilk, represented here as well today. We also invested in agri-tech company, a great one, Israel just spoke here today. Vertical farming companies. So we invested in this field, and as we mentioned before, we are a generalist fund, but we just believe that there is a great opportunity here, a big problem, and this is what VCs are doing, right? Trying to solve big problems. So that's why we are here, and I believe this is how you make it mainstream. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Liat. I'm a partner at OurCrowd. We are a platform for investment in startups. We have behind us 200,000 accredited investors from all over the world that support startups in various fields. We invested today in 350 companies, but I'm happy to say that when I looked at our portfolio, we already have close to 30 climate tech investments. I think that really good companies will get funding, whether they're climate tech or not. This is general. And as the market is more educated and there are new entrepreneurs and VCs that are interested to invest in climate tech, there will be more startups, and that there will be more startups, there will be more good startups that will get funded. The new generation of entrepreneurs are looking at climate tech. There was a report just saying that 1 out of 7 entrepreneurs want to, or starting a climate tech investment. The fact that we have a panel of generalist funds that looking into climate tech is already a very good start in that direction. when we started investing in climate tech, we found out that these are massive market opportunities in climate tech. This is not just to invest because it's in and cool and there is FOMO around it. There are massive markets because we are replacing here or helping improve huge industries. And when VCs realize that these are massive markets, they will be behind it. There are challenges, and it takes time for VCs to do that, and I think that's why it takes time also for the Israeli ecosystem to grow into it, because some startups require maybe a longer time to market and so on. I think that a combination of various type of investors supporting startup in various stages will be the answer for that, joining forces. For us, because of our model, investor invests in per company, and we found that individual investor, family office, which are investors, don't mind the timeline so much, and we have the ability to invest also in longer-term startups. Some of you guys will support them maybe at a later stage, and together we'll be able to create it more of a mainstream.
Okay, thank you. So I think to continue your what you said, there's entrepreneurs here in the crowd and probably outside who maybe if 2 years ago they would work on a fintech company, a cyber company, software company, but there's a lot of changes happening in the market, and they would like to work on a climate solution and find a good problem. So what do you think could be an interesting problem to solve? Or what are sectors that are currently looking for solutions that you believe are interesting to work on? What would you recommend? So I'd like to, Elle?
Sure. So first of all, I would love to speak to the entrepreneurs here in the crowd. So at Hanaco is an Israeli and US-based fund, and we have boots on the ground in Tel Aviv and in New York. And actually, we like sensing the market and understanding what is the focus of the entrepreneurs. And because we love backing strong entrepreneurs. This is what we are doing at Hanaco. And I can definitely say that I see the transition of amazing founders coming from elite army unit and Fortune 500 companies into the space of climate tech. I think that they also understand that there is a great opportunity there. So it's a very interesting point. Regarding interesting trends, so we at Hanaco invested mainly in the mitigation side, although we also love seeing adaptation companies that are trying to tackle the adaptation side. In it, I think that at Hanaco, we are really focusing on boosting food security. That's why we invested in a few companies that I mentioned before. We are also looking for energy companies and for companies that are trying to tackle extreme weather events. We have so many challenges, but we are trying to focus on the most important one for us right now.
Natalie,
Thanks.
do you have any recommendations to potential entrepreneurs?
I don't think that I have except for the energy that I think is currently a very interesting sector, in particular due to the geopolitical situation, and green energy has developed tremendously. I think that in general, I would say that looking at the ecosystem, there is still a lot of things to be accomplished, as Liat said. The ecosystem is developed, but just to a certain point. And when an entrepreneur enters this market and thinks about establishing a company, then I think that it would be mostly important for him or her to see that funding is available along the way. Because one of the most challenging issues of environments or ecosystems that are still in development stage is the funding. And if I need to compare it to the beginning of the general VC industry in Israel, or in the world, but in Israel it started about 25, 30 years ago. So Israel started as a VC ecosystem up to a point that companies were sold very early on and did not reach the market. And this was for many, many years, and there was no growth capital. And I think that this is the case also now in the environmental or climate tech. Because when we looked at it, we saw that there is a certain point in time where it becomes more difficult to raise capital. So if I were you and try to think about what are the areas that to tag into, so I would find more areas that have more funding and more availability of capital also in the later stage. And that means that the market needs to be more ready for the technology that you are trying to develop.
Would you want to answer? Okay. Now, as we know, in this sector, it's not like in software, you can't really get to the market in 1 year and start to grow your ARR. There's regulation, there's a longer time to market, there's research, and we see that as part of the fact that less private market funding is going into. What would you recommend? Let's say there's an entrepreneur here who's trying to work on alternative energy, or water system, and now he needs 4 or 5 years in the lab. Do you think that he needs, can VCs invest in longer terms, 7 years, 10 years until you see actually return?
Well, it's true for all enterprises. You, as an entrepreneur, you have to really bark up the right tree. Right? If you want to get funded, you need to find the funding mechanism that works for what you're building. If the fund is focused on software only and is looking to scale companies after year 5 and sell them by year 7, and you have 4 years to work in the lab, this is not a good fit. So try to find the right investors that are actually aligned with your mission, that understand your sector, and are able to support your growth stage. So not every company that is building a product that needs 4 years in the lab before it can even start penetrating the market is a good fit for mainstream VC. Maybe it's a better fit for an incubator for a couple of years, getting funded by the Innovation Authority, going through an accelerator program, and then coming over to the VCs when they're a little bit more mature. For other organizations, for example, it might be better to go to private equity funds. So the funding mechanism has to fit the type and life cycle of the investee. That's, I think, the main message, because I get a lot of requests from founders, but I always tell them, look at our portfolio and look at the way that we're doing things. And at Pitango, we have an early stage fund, and we also have a growth fund. So we actually take companies from throughout the cycle all the way to IPO, which is good. But if it takes 20 years until you can actually have some good result, it's just not a good fit. So obviously for VCs, the first and most approachable startups are the digital ones. Software, anything around software. We've invested in Tomorrow.io, but we also invested in Dumatalk and Plantish, okay, which do have a lab period. So try to find the right pace. So digital and digital transformation, definitely. Anything that can be brought into the market within a reasonable period of a few years, yes. Serial entrepreneurs that have already exited other companies, maybe in cyber, maybe in fintech, but are now building a new company around climate, definitely, because you reduce the risk by investing in a successful entrepreneur. So basically, we're trying to take risks, but in a way that is reasonable for our own investors, for our investment strategy, but also makes sense for the investee. So there needs to be a set of expectations that are aligned, and that way you can really succeed.
Natalie, do you think a fund like yours, who is, of course, how long since Viola was established? Carmel, 25 years?
22.
22 years, one of the most, I would say, the first funds in Israel. Are you able to look at these kinds of time to market? Are you able to look at companies who have 5 to 7 years until they are able to show returns?
To show return, you mean an exit in 5 to 7 years? Because this is good. But I have to tell you that this is challenging. And honestly, I myself have been looking into agtech companies. And whenever you compare the growth pace and the progression of agtech company To B2B software company, it's always much more challenging to not only to decide by yourself that you want to make this investment, but to convince my partners to do it. And sometimes it's not justifiable to make the investment. But I do think that this will change. This will change because for climate tech and companies, ag tech, food tech, other areas, they will develop and will have more access to capital. And the market will be much more ready to accept their products. And also automation and innovation is changing and scaling to be much faster than today. So I think the innovation pace will drive these markets to be faster, and that will definitely help the ecosystem to develop. So at the moment it is more challenging, but it will change. And actually our VC fund, like Pitango, we have a VC fund. I'm part of the growth fund. On the VC fund, I know for a fact that they are now doing a job and better understanding food tech, specifically food tech market, because I think this is maybe food tech and ag tech are the most developed ones, and that will drive this deal flow or deals that will be done in the next couple of years into the growth stage investing.
Liat?
Yeah, I think that for more generalist fund that maybe invest also in climate tech, the time horizon might not fit the fund always for all startups. But there are many climate-specific funds and funds that come also early on, and they have different time horizons, so they will be a good place to start with. Our model, for example, our investors will invest early and don't mind the timeline, so models like OurCrowd could be a good fit. I found that with climate tech companies, because the big problems that are being solved, actually large strategic players come in quite early. They want to change, they need to change big industries, and they're willing to invest quite early and take the risk and fund quite significantly these companies. And Hanan, I think it's also the government's role to help these companies at that stage, because if we're not going to support them and they are solving big issues, I think grants, non-dilutive equity will be great for these startups. So that.
Okay, so after, I think blaming the government is always the right thing to go. And
not blaming, suggesting.
No, we're already very, very deeply inside, as you know, from your incubators in OurCrowd.
Right.
So actually in the new government plan that Minister Zandberg talked about and our CEO Dror talked about earlier, I think the government is actually one step forward. Because just a few months ago, a 3 billion shekels plan was approved to actually support the climate tech sector. And it has two main goals. So one goal is actually to support climate tech startups here in Israel. And I think our support in this conference and in other incubators and laboratories are part of it. But the second goal, which is I think very unique to this sector, is we actually want to see the implementation of these technologies in Israel. In the last COP last year in Glasgow, Prime Minister Bennett announced that we will try to get to not only try, we will get to zero emissions by 2050, which means that part of our mission is to see these companies implementing their technologies here in Israel. So usually Israeli companies, of course, are looking for abroad. They go to the US and to Europe. Do you think that there's any chance that in this sector it will be a bit different and we can actually implement these technologies in Israel, so actually Israel can get to this mission of net zero by 2050? That's a hard one, I know.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. Basically, it's the dream, right? We are the startup nation, and we have the best fintech companies, but try going to the bank in Israel and using these technologies, right? You'll fail. And it's simple. Israel is a small market. Companies are global by design. They want to conquer the world, otherwise they just don't have a raison d'être. It's just impossible for them to stay alive. So, if there's no good reason for them to work in Israel for some obscure reason, like seriously, then immediately they scale. They go to mostly the US market, the European market, not even emerging markets. So Israel is out of the game. But the government did take a step with Israel Digitalit to try to embed and include technologies that are developed in Israel for the sake of Israel. Climate, I think, is a little bit different. First of all, there's more of a large market in Israel for the usage of climate tech solutions through the utility companies, to the large corporates, the oil and gas companies, natural resources. There's still, it's quite large. And if it succeeds as beta sites, or is it like for the beginning of the companies, and it works, there's no reason to take it out and just keep moving. They'll be able to scale the companies based on their experience here in Israel. So I think the opportunity is there. But there needs to be something that facilitates that opportunity. So, and that is, again, the role, I think, of the government, to connect and give incentives to the large corporates, to the startups, to the ecosystem, the regulatory ecosystem and everything around it, to really enable these startups to integrate their solutions here in Israel and then keep going so that they can later scale to other countries. So I think in this particular domain of climate tech, we have a better chance of success rather than just digital, like fintech and cyber and other stuff, I think.
Yeah, I think I can add that we definitely believe that Israel can be like a climate tech center. We definitely have the human capital here, and we can test it. Like we can conduct fast POCs here in Israel because we have the geographic. Like we can deal with it. Actually, when we discussed the panel, I wanted to ask our portfolio companies for their perspective on this subject because I believe that they are living through these challenges. And they mentioned that it's I wouldn't like to mention names, but that there is a strong competition. I mean, the countries in Europe are also trying to bring startups into their geography. And I understood that they are offering great grants for Israeli portfolio companies, what attracts Israeli entrepreneurs to build their facilities in Europe. So I believe that this can be a great opportunity for us in Israel. Like we need to figure it out. We need to find the right way of doing it. And it's not only the grants, also like tax reductions, etc. So maybe we should think of these kind of solutions as well.
Yeah, I will echo your note. Some of our companies need to build pilot plants, and they need to be commercial plants. That is very capital intensive. And if they were able to get enough help from the Israeli government, I believe they would start here. Pilot plants maybe they will do on their own expense, but in their early stage, it's very hard to get that financing because they're pre-revenue. So if the country will support them more and give them more grant, more than they get in other places, they will have it built here. Especially the first commercial plant, maybe not all of them, in some cases. Israel could get credits, so it's good. Israel could get people to have skills work in climate tech, manufacturing, things like that. So I think that can be a good setup.
Okay. I consider Zoom as maybe the biggest climate tech company. I don't think when they started the company, they thought that there will be less air traffic to conferences. As we see, there are still conferences after COVID, but there's probably, if you need to do a first meeting with a startup, you won't go to San Francisco for that. And my question is, not everyone can sit in the lab now for 5 years and establish a carbon capture company, right? So the question, do you think there's interesting in maybe non-deep technologies solutions in the software sector that can maybe make a difference on the climate status?
So to me, this is exactly the point. So Zoom wasn't set up as a company in climate tech. They didn't consider themselves as a climate company, right? And the same goes for a lot of other companies. And if you have climate considerations in how you build your product and how you build your operations and the solution that you're providing, and you're adding the climate component to it, or the purpose even component to it, then all of a sudden you discover that you might have additional offering in your product, additional product market fit for customers you might have not thought about in the beginning. You have an offering that maybe is even better than before, and you have access to capital and to talent, which is interested in creating purpose. So what I always say to all the companies, investing in climate tech is important. That's why we're here. We want to invest in more climate tech companies. But aside from that, as mainstream investors who are investing in quantum computing and AI and mobility and everything in between, these need to be integrated into climate considerations, thinking about our planet, our environment, our people that live here as part of our business case, whatever company we build. So first of all, do no harm, obviously, but after that, always consider purpose and planet, people and planet in every company that you do and in every investment that you do. That will increase the number of solutions like Zoom. Zoom is a good climate solution. It wasn't built to do that, but that's what it does. If you have that in your mindset, you create climate change, positive climate change. This is our responsibility as investors, to teach the startups to integrate climate considerations and to integrate those into our investment considerations.
Yeah, I want to address this as well. I think that definitely climate tech companies can be companies that are not related to production of a product in a lab. In particular, I would stress out data. Data is a great way to create change and to disrupt a whole environment. We've seen it in the healthcare and the digital healthcare, how data is used in order to change things, processes, and I think that also in the climate tech full ecosystem, a lot can be changed through data. Of course, not raw data, but the companies need to develop the analytics of the data, which is very relevant for any investor, by the way. And I would say that this is the first example that I would take from our generalist world into the climate tech investments.
By the way, I don't know if you saw earlier today, it was announced that Brizometer, a company that actually was part of choosing an accelerator, a social accelerator, 10 years ago, was just acquired for $200 million by Google today. And they're typically software company helping you to understand, understand how much is their pollution outside. So there's...
Yeah, I saw a company in the field of water, understanding pollution and diseases through water, through data that they collect. And that is very interesting as well.
I see we have 5 more minutes, and there's many entrepreneurs here in the crowd. Anyone maybe wants to ask a question, the panel? No one? Here, we have a brave. Yeah.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben. I'm not sure that the question is relating to these funds, but maybe something that is you can tell us a little bit about it. So I'm more in the circular economy world. I'm involved in many projects, also of the governmental side. And we see that sometimes, before they mention the offtake side. I mean, when the startup or the new company has a brilliant idea and a prototype, when it needs to scale, sometimes it's not about the investment of a new technology, but of the offtake or the procurement. So does the funds today are ready to be a part of this funding to help the scaling up of the projects whether by procurement or by infrastructure that is needed to implement and to demonstrate this large scale. And I have many examples. I don't want to give it now, but this is something that many, many companies face, I think, in Israel.
If I understood your question, I think it's very similar to the semiconductor industry, where companies had to work for a very long period on the design of the chip and had to invest a lot of capital in the process. So I hope this is what you meant. And actually, Israel has started with semiconductor. That was like the initiation of VC and investments in Israel on that part, with companies like Mellanox. And I think that it's all regarding not what you have to fund at the moment, but what is the opportunity in the future. So if you are able to present the vision going forward and the opportunity that lies ahead for the company, then it's possible to get funded, in my opinion.
I have to say something. I feel that it's very clear also from the answers we're talking here with generalist funds who are investing in every sector. So they can choose to invest in your company, or they can invest in a company who's doing 2 million ARR and will grow to 20 million next year. And it's a hard decision because funds are here to make money. You know, I don't know if you know that, but they're here to make money. They don't have a social, they have, Cecile has, by the way, but most funds, they need to make money. And it's very hard to choose your company and another company. But funds are looking for $1 billion company, right? Their model is based on this home run to bring $1 billion company, and they're okay with taking higher risks if there's a potential to a higher return. Okay? And I think for entrepreneurs here in the crowd who are trying to build something that actually can save our planet, that's a big $1 billion company, right? And you need to show that you're able to solve a huge problem in order to get funding when it's very, very risky. I'm leading one of our programs in the Innovation Authority. We have a seed program. We give matching of 40 to 50% matching to funds. A year ago, we saw almost no companies in this space. Currently, I'm seeing more and more generalist funds who are looking to invest in companies who have maybe 4 or 5 years to market. The reason is because the potential, if they succeed, is to save the planet, okay? So I think for you, maybe a tip, if you want to get general money funding, show a big problem and show a good solution.
Excellent advice.
And maybe I'll finish with that. I have just one sentence by Bill Gates in his book. I think it's countries that build great zero carbon companies will be the ones that lead the global economies in the coming decades. Okay, so other than saving the planet, that's important. If Israel becomes a global leader in climate tech, also our economy will be a global leader. And we'll finish with that. So thank you very much for the panelists.
Thank you.